Welcome to CNN Tonight. I'm Jake Tapper in Washington, and tonight, the United States of America versus a far-right militia accused of trying to overthrow the government. And perhaps its biggest test yet. Federal prosecutors today rested their historic case against 5 alleged leaders of the Oath Keepers, including its founder, for their role in the U.S. Capitol attack on January 6, 2021. Over the last month, the Justice Department presented witness testimony and shocking videos and damning text messages and more, all of it evidence that prosecutors say proves the 5 defendants attempted to carry out a coordinated conspiracy to stop the legal and lawful transfer of presidential power and keep Donald Trump in the White House. Now, why is this case so different than the hundreds of other cases facing alleged January 6 rioters and insurrectionists? 2 words: seditious conspiracy. That's a rare charge. It's one that was put on the books around the time of the U.S. Civil War, when the Confederacy declared war on the U.S. government. It's a charge reserved for only the gravest of threats to the U.S. government. And these 5 alleged Oath Keepers are the first to stand trial for this accusation in more than a decade. To really understand this case, you got to first understand who and what the Oath Keepers are. The group was founded by this guy, Stewart Rhodes, in 2009. Rhodes is an anti-government extremist, an Army veteran, and a disbarred lawyer. He accidentally shot out his own eye several years ago. And according to its former website, the Oath Keepers is a, quote, nonpartisan association of current and formerly serving military, police, and first responders who pledge to fulfill the oath all military and police take to defend the Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic, unquote. But translated, what that means is they think they don't have to follow any orders from any government that they think is illegitimate, such as our current democratically elected one.
You got to declare everything comes out of King Biden's mouth as illegitimate and null and void from inception because he's not a legitimate president.
So let's go inside the courtroom now and examine the case so far. Prosecutors say that Rhodes, along with Kelly Meggs, Jessica Watkins, Kenneth Harrelson, and Thomas Caldwell, planned for an armed rebellion long before January 6, and that they were prepared to do anything necessary to keep Joe Biden out of the White House. Prosecutors allege that members of the Oath Keepers attended rallies in D.C. in November and December of 2020 as, quote, dry runs. And here's what Rhodes said in December 2020 at one of those events as he tried to encourage President Trump to fight to stay in office.
That if he does not do it now while he is commander-in-chief, we're going to have to do it ourselves later in a much more desperate, much more bloody war.
A much more desperate, much more bloody war. They were dressed for that bloody war the next month, January 6. Oath Keepers decked out in full battle gear, seen moving through the mob purposefully and entering the Capitol. Prosecutors say that Meggs, Harrelson, and Watkins were part of this stack formation, which joined a mob of people, some of whom were attacking police officers. Rhodes also allegedly entered the Capitol grounds and mentioned having a quick reaction force, a QRF, that's what it's called in the military, at a hotel outside Washington, D.C., with other members carrying firearms, standing by to join his bloody war if necessary. Prosecutors say those QRF teams were coordinated in part by Thomas Caldwell, the 5th defendant on trial right now. Today, the defense began to present its case, and we've gotten a glimpse into their strategy already. Defense attorneys argue that the Oath Keepers never had a specific plan on January 6, and that Rhodes never explicitly instructed the group to enter the Capitol. The defense attorneys also say that the Oath Keepers were not violent during the riot, and they themselves never called in their quick reaction forces, their QRFs. Obviously, prosecutors disagree and think the Oath Keepers were conspiring for much more than they actually carried out on that day, hence the charge of seditious conspiracy. So what does that mean? What is this statute in U.S. federal law? Why does it exist? Well, as I told you, it dates back to 1861 in the U.S. Civil War. Congress made it a crime to conspire to overthrow the U.S. government or to conspire to use force to, quote, prevent, hinder, or delay the execution of any law of the United States. The Confederate insurrectionists failed. though it took 4 years to stop their armed rebellion. And the seditious conspiracy charge has rarely been used since. It was used notably in 1954 against terrorists pushing Puerto Rican independence.
Ruthless, fanatic violence erupted in the halls of Congress. 3 men and a woman believed to be members of the Puerto Rican nationalist gang that in November 1950 attempted the assassination of President Truman opened fire from the visitors' gallery of the House of Representatives. Estimates of the numbers of shots fired range from 15 to 30, and each bullet hole found is a grim reminder to those who were present of the terrible surprise attack.
In that attack on the Capitol, 5 congressmen were shot and wounded, but thankfully all survived. And those suspects were convicted on charges of seditious conspiracy. The last time the Justice Department brought those charges and won the case was in 1995, when an Egyptian cleric, the so-called Blind Sheikh, and 9 of his followers were convicted in a plot to blow up the United Nations and other buildings. But look, experts say the broad nature of the seditious conspiracy law can be difficult to sell to a jury. In 1988, a jury acquitted a group of white supremacists accused of plotting to overthrow the government and establish an all-white nation. And 10 years ago, a judge just dismissed a case against a Michigan militia accused of plotting an attack on law enforcement. All of that raises the stakes for the Justice Department today in this trial against the Oath Keepers and its upcoming trial against a different far-right group, the Proud Boys. Now look, January 6th was clearly an effort to stop the peaceful transfer of power, but prosecutors are going to have to prove and convince a jury that it was coordinated. As evidenced by the attack on Paul Pelosi last week, or the attempted attack on Supreme Court Justice Brett Kavanaugh a few months ago, domestic extremist violence is a real threat. A study from earlier this year by the Anti-Defamation League reveals, quote, right-wing extremists were linked to at least 26 extremist-related murders in the United States in 2021 and have been responsible for 75% of such murders in the last 10 years, unquote. So this has been building for years. Remember the Unite the Right gathering of racists and extremists in Charlottesville? Now look, back in 2020, at the first presidential debate, our own Chris Wallace directly asked then-President Trump if he was willing to condemn white supremacists and far-right groups such as the Proud Boys. Do you remember Trump's response?
Proud Boys, stand back and stand by.
Stand back and stand by. Justice Department prosecutors say the evidence shows that these far-right groups were standing by. They were waiting for a green light to undermine democracy and allow Trump to hold on to power. As the January 6th Select House Committee has proven, there were connections between members of these far-right groups and folks in Donald Trump's orbit, people like Roger Stone or Michael Flynn. I asked Trump's former communications director, Alyssa Farah Griffin, why?
The only reason you would be talking to those groups is because you wanted a violent presence at the Capitol that day.
Donald Trump could today, right now, issue a clear and unequivocal condemnation of the Oath Keepers and the Proud Boys and what they tried to do that day. You'd think condemning would-be terrorists charged by the U.S. Department of Justice with seditious conspiracy would not be difficult. Ask yourself, why hasn't he? Do you remember what the former spokesman for the Oath Keepers told the January 6th committee a few months ago?
If a president that's willing to try to instill and encourage, to whip up a civil war amongst his followers using lies and deceit and snake oil, and regardless of the human impact, what else is he going to do if he gets elected again?